OK, let's get more reaction, shall we, to England's defeat to Australia in the second Ashes Test at Lords. That controversial dismissal of Jonny Bairstow. Look, he's actually in the studio. Nick Compton, former England opener, joins me now. Lovely to see you actually here rather than talking to you down the line. Wonderful to see you. Thanks for coming in. Right, OK. Letter of the law, spirit of the game. Sometimes two different things. What way did you see that Bairstow dismissal yesterday?
Well, I think it was a real opportunity for Pat Cummins to, perhaps reverse his decision. I think he missed an opportunity there in many ways. He's obviously a very impressive man, an impressive captain. And the way the series has been played so far, I think it's been done in the right manner. But I think it's certainly raised the temperature, hasn't it, of an Ashes series that perhaps didn't need raising because the cricket's been, dynamic, it's been entertaining. But I just think, looking at this dismissal, Jonny's not really gaining an added advantage. It's the end of the over. He's walking down the wicket. People say it's a little bit sloppy. And of course, by the letter of the law, it is out because, potentially wasn't called over. But he's in his crease. He makes he marks his guard. And it's almost like an acceptance that perhaps the over's done. And there's been a rhythm to the game. There's a rhythm to when the ball comes to the keeper and when it gets thrown back to the next man to get onto the next delivery. So in many ways, some could see it as perhaps a slightly cheap shot. There was an allusion to Jonny doing it in the innings previous to Warner and to Marnus Labuschagne, but those two batsmen were standing out of their crease, and there's a difference. I think people need to understand that. They're gaining an added advantage by disrupting the bowler's length or line. I think Jonny was doing that in that instance. He was in his crease. It was the end of the over. Perhaps a missed opportunity for Pat Cummins there. Yeah,
the fact that it was the end of the over, the significant point there. Let's get the clarification and the ground rules. First of all, by the letter of the law, it's a perfectly fair dismissal. Spirit of the game, how much is that important? Is that what separates perhaps cricket from other sports we can mention, that it is played with this idea of a good conduct?
Yeah, I think so. I think having played the game for a number of years, there's a way that the game is played. There's an acceptance of, the spirit of cricket. And I think it's not trying to sort of put the two against each other, the letter of the law and the spirit of cricket. But, in that instance, as I said, and I'll allude to it, Jonny wasn't trying to gain an added advantage. There was no quick single being taken. There wasn't an extra run being had. There wasn't trying to disrupt the bowler's line. It was the end of the over. A few split seconds or a couple of seconds, he's walked out of his crease, perhaps a little bit sloppy in hindsight. I know a lot of, intelligent cricket thinkers have said that it was sloppy from Jonny, but I think, spirit of the cricket, comes to the fore there, and I think Pat Cummins perhaps could have withdrawn his decision, in my opinion.
Yeah, plenty have been made and references to Mancating, which is different, isn't it? Because in that instance, the batsman following up is trying to gain an advantage again.
Yeah, again, Mancating, the batsman who's walking in with the bowler is taking a little advantage, trying to get a quick single, trying to gain that extra split second where he can get to the other side. So again, Mancating has its place because batsmen have been taking that, particularly in T20 cricket where you're trying to get quick runs, you're trying to get back for another for a second, so you might walk a bit further. And bowlers might see that, and of course, that has been brought in. Whereas I think, again, Jonny wasn't trying to do that. I think it was the end of the over. It was the letter of the law. Does the game need to be played in that way? I think in many ways it would have been a great act of sportsmanship, and I think that would have been celebrated. Even if England had won the match, I think it would have been really celebrated. It would have been, the series would be 1-1, and I think it would have set up for an already, it's been a very hyped series, isn't it? And it's playing up to that anyway in terms of the way the cricket's been played. But I think, the sportsmanship there would have been a great act of sportsmanship, should I say.
To play devil's advocate, would we have been discussing this if England had done it?
Well, I mean, you can go by Stokes' reaction, I suppose. It's easy for him to say that, sitting on the opposite foot. But had he been Pat Cummins, he said that he wouldn't have wanted to win a game in that nature and in that fashion. And, I kind of believe Ben there in many ways. I think, look, of course, I'm an England fan, England supporter, but I try to look at it from, a slight distance, and it just didn't feel right. When it happened, there was just something inside me that went, that's not right. But I think it's definitely heated up the series. It's galvanised the series, and maybe it's that little bit of nestle that is needed for the series. It's been played in quite a sort of chummy fashion the first two matches, and I think now this is really going to turn up the heat.
Yeah, and it's a quick turnaround as well, isn't it, to Leeds? So if they thought Lords was a little raucous yesterday afternoon, what's Leeds going to be like?
Well, it's going to ramp up, that's for sure. I've never seen Lords like that. I mean, that long room, it's a very unique place, a very special place, having walked through there a number of times. And, the fans at Lords are pretty subdued, when you compare it to Edgbaston and Headingley. But I think it's gonna ramp things up a little bit. I think this series is going to have some needle. It's something I think that's going to really potentially bring England back into it. I think it's going to galvanise them. I think you look at the way Stuart Broad batted yesterday, the courage that he showed, and hopefully that can be instilled through more of the England players, because I think in many ways there's been a few, if we go back to the cricket, which I think we should bring it back to, there's been some very exciting, fantastic cricket, and it's living up to the hype that the series, has been talked about. But I think in many ways England have made, some decisions, but through the two Test matches, which have left them short, and that's why they're 2-0 down. And I think perhaps that's the sort of the needle that they need to kind of pull them together.
Talking of great batting performances, okay, sadly it's got lost, hasn't it? I would think in this Bairstow kerfuffle, but Ben Stokes with the bat, just how good was that? Yeah, brilliant. I mean, it's hard to find words to talk about some of the things he does on the cricket field. But I think what was interesting is the intelligence and the way that he played. All this talk about this aggressive England team, the brand of cricket they're playing. But you look at some of the shots he played, the calculated risks he took. He waited for balls in certain areas, and he got himself in. You don't have to go from ball one, where we've seen, particularly in the first innings, this happy hooking tendency from some of the players where they almost just gave their wickets away. And there's a way to mix, this aggressive cricket with real intelligence. And I think Ben Stokes, highlighted that perfectly. His innings was well timed. And he put his foot down when he needed to. And I think that's where England have just been missing at key moments in the game. Edgbaston, second innings, they had the game there. They had a chance to really put on a big total in that second innings and almost just gave their wickets away. So I think they need to, if they can mix that aggression with a little bit of more cricket intelligence and timing, I think England have got a chance. OK, so you've got a chance despite being 2-0 down. If they were to lose this series and lose it emphatically, we were all buoyed by Bazball going into this after what happened over the winter. Does that need a rethink if the Ashes doesn't go the way England want it to? Well, I think there were question marks before this series. It's fine doing it against, they talked about New Zealand and Pakistan, and they had some great results against them, but can you do it against the world #1 team? And so some of those questions are being answered at the moment. We're 2-0 down. Australia have a very skilled bowling attack, a very skilled team. They're well settled, they're well drilled. So there was no illusions that this was going to be a sterner test than the ones that they've had in the past. So it will be, some interesting questions will be asked. There's a lot of talk about England playing with entertainment, playing with aggression and trying to entertain the crowds. And I think there's one thing doing that. But at the end of the day, it comes down to, is it entertaining losing all the time? And if England lose 3-0, 4-0, 5-0, there will be questions asked. And, I think I come back to the fact that the brand of cricket they're playing is entertaining. The crowds and the reactions have been fantastic. The cricket that's been played has been electric and been dynamic, and the ups and downs and the ebbs and flows, everything you want in a test match, everything you want in a test match series. But I just think England need to go one step further and actually mix some of that aggression with a bit more intelligence and nous, because I think we've missed key moments and opportunities in the game. Well, the former England batsman Nick Compton has stayed with us here, and look, he's got his autobiography out. It's fantastic. It's called Legacy. It's released on Thursday. Nick, you've waited a few years after retiring to write this, but what was it like reflecting on your career? And it goes much deeper than, well, I scored 100 here and then I scored a 6. There's a lot more to the book than just that, isn't there? Yeah, I think there is, Rob. I was encouraged to do it for quite a while, I think. And when I was sort of coming to the end of my career, I probably had
a degree of imposter syndrome in many ways. I didn't have the career that an Alistair Cook or a Ben Stokes has had, or a James Anderson. So I sort of felt that, writing a book and a sports book, they're normally written by sort of these legends of the game. And so I think the book goes a little bit beyond that, beyond the sport itself. Perhaps a bit more about some of the internal struggles and battles with going into elite sport, having perhaps a slightly obsessive personality at times, perfectionist tendencies. And I think, things that I've, in time, having gone through the process of the book and spoken to many people, that others, have similar challenges. And it did take some time to sort of agree to do it. But I think in doing it, there's been a huge amount of learning that's gone on, and, hopefully a chance to impart, some support and help, and perhaps give that to others who read the book and who can resonate with some of the difficulties that they've had too.
Yeah, because you were split in two ways of thinking about this. I mean, where you come from, the legacy that was handed down to you of not just your father, but also, of course, your grandfather, Dennis Compton. The idea is genetically, am I destined to be this great thing? Or is the pressure and the need for me to be as good just too much? And how do I balance the two there?
Yeah, and I never really knew how to get to that answer. I think it was a constant struggle, and I think in the pursuit of excellence and in the pursuit of trying to maybe emulate Grandad or the professionals around me, I had this figure of Grandad from a very young age. The effect of those pictures on family walls. And just what that perhaps imprinted in my own mind in terms of what it meant to be successful, what it meant to go forward and do something with your life. And, perhaps there was an unhealthy relationship in trying to do that, in trying to achieve some of those levels. And I was constantly thought between, being a kid that, had this obsession and then trying to be a kid and live a normal life, And I think in that pursuit and in trying to push that hard, I realized that it probably did detriment to my own mental health. And that was something that came up quite quickly, I think, particularly in my early 30s. Started to feel like things weren't quite right. And, that was quite a hard, I'd say, lesson to learn, but also quite hard to sort of admit and accept to myself.
Well, what does come across as well is cricket is a team sport played by individuals, and maybe the loneliness of being an elite athlete at such a high level at Test cricket, and how you had to carry that burden on your own. You didn't feel like you could speak to the team psychologist because you thought that would reflect badly, and yet when you confided in a teammate, it didn't end well, did it? No,
that was a very tough balance, and something that I did struggle with throughout the career in terms of trying to embody this, person that was, a good team man that would go out there and be a strong person for the team. And I suppose you're trying to embody that yourself because, of course, you're playing an elite sport and it requires those attributes to go out and be successful. But it was a struggle. It was a struggle and a loneliness in many times. I mean, after time, the hotel rooms become lonely. The travel doesn't become as exciting, and suddenly you're left with your thoughts. And of course, there's the pressure behind needing to try and perform. And I think we're now in a world where, mental health is, of course, more accepted, more spoken about. I'm not the first person to have opened up as a professional athlete about some of the struggles and difficulties. But I hope that, there are certain, attributes and facets to trying to go into elite sport as a young person that can resonate with others. And, I think I have a greater degree of empathy perhaps for people who do want to do it differently in sport as well. I think there's an accepted, at times, one-dimensional view of a sportsman, of an athlete. And I think there's a lot of people in the cricket teams I played in who are a bit different, who do see things from a different perspective. And, sometimes those players or those people aren't always accepted. And I've seen a lot of them fall out of the game in many ways because there hasn't been an understanding or an acceptance of the individual or an ability to go, that guy might seem a little bit difficult or a bit misunderstood, but he is worth the bother. He is worth paying the time and giving the attention to. And I think that's where the art of management comes in. And I think, bringing it back to, Ben Stokes in England, Ben's had his problems that he's been very open about, and I think he's created. And what's been one great thing about this England team is they seem to have created a more open and accepting and safer space for people to be who they are. And I think that's not easy to do.
Yeah, sadly we've only got about 20 seconds left. Have you found solace now?
Oh, definitely. I think I've accepted and tried to be a little bit kinder to myself and understand that, I did have a good career, and to be proud of what I did achieve, and hopefully realise that others, despite some of the difficulties, can too achieve themselves.